The following podcast is dedicated to sonic excellence.
Harry had a little man.
Donk. Hello and welcome to the Pop Donk Podcast, a beginner's guide to sound design. Come on, let's have some fun.
Episode 11, Radio Tuning. A chat with Fred Seibert, Part 1.
When I first got into cartoons, you can't imagine how many people told me the cartoons suck because they don't look like Disney. And eventually people got over it, but it was like 30 or 40 years before.
Well, welcome back to Parp Donk. We are very, very thrilled this episode to welcome Fred Seibert to the podcast. And Fred is a longtime friend of Clack Studios and colleague sometimes of John and Jim, and worked with everybody, MTV, Nickelodeon, Hanna-Barbera, was a record producer. Such a storied career, and we're honored to have him today. Hi, Fred.
Hey, guys, I'm honored to be here, actually. Thank you so much for asking me.
You started out as a record producer, producing jazz and blues records in the 70s, and became one of MTV's founding creators. After that, in 1981, went on to shape Nickelodeon's identity, and from there went to different arms of animation, as well as your creative agency, Fred Allen. Can you walk us through your journey and how these pieces fit together?
Well, I think the only way they fit together is I did them, because there's no straight line one way or the other.
Yeah.
I started making records because I had a rock band in high school. I was of the Beatles generation. My life changed the day that the Beatles went on Ed Sullivan. And
Me too.
we're not alone. It changed for millions of people. And in my case, I actually was a science math kid who went to college initially to study chemistry, and 6 weeks in, turned to my lab mate and said, I like the Beatles more than this. And I walked into my college radio station and never left. To this day, I haven't graduated from college because I basically majored in college radio. And it happened that my college radio station was in New York City, and we didn't play any pop music. They thought it was beneath them, and they thought they had a mission to bring the world things that were better.
College station.
And because New York was the center of jazz, we got visited by everybody, by all the major figures. This is in the 1970s, and all the major figures of the 70s. And a number of them came up to play, to bring their bands and cram themselves into a little radio booth and perform. And it happened that nobody at the station was actually interested in recording them, and I was hungry. I was starving for the idea of recording, because I had started to realize that I was never going to work hard enough to be a good enough musician to be a musician. And I just wanted to be around people who were great. And so I started recording them all, and little by little it led to a really poor career of producing for no money. I made $2,500 a year in my best year.
Right.
Wow.
But worked on records, got Grammy nominations and a lot of respect over the years. One of them was just reissued last week, which was amazing.
Wow. Congratulations.
Which one?
Thank you. It was called Double Exposure. It was a duet record between an organist named Larry Young and a percussionist and composer named Joe Chambers.
Cool.
And very, how do we put it, challenging listening. And I was broke, and I was desperate, and I needed to make some money because my roommate was paying my rent and buying the food.
Yeah.
For years, by the way. For years.
Nice roommate.
Well, he was amazing. He's amazing. While I was trying to find myself, And one thing led to another, and another college radio buddy turned me on to a job in, of all things, country music radio in New York City. An anomaly if there ever was one. But I took the job reluctantly because I didn't have an affinity for the music. And lo and behold, I met the craziest, most difficult and volatile human I've ever known, who became the most important mentor in my life, a guy called Dale Pond, who some of you might have run into over the years.
Yep.
He eventually came to me as a vendor and created I Want My MTV and the whole campaign that went with that. But as nutty as he was brilliant. And he was brilliant at media promotion, which I knew nothing about. Had no understanding of. And in the process of working for him, learned so many things that I tell people all the time. I don't go through one day without recalling something I learned from this guy.
Wow. That's like the definition of a mentor.
Wow.
And in that process, by the way, not unlike Tom Clack, I should add.
Right.
Oh,
Right,
yes.
you know,
we can all, agree with that.
And we'll get to that, but it's actually why we started going to Tom to begin with. In any event, like I said, Dale was very volatile, and one thing led to another, and we stopped talking to each other. I couldn't take it anymore. And for about a year, we didn't speak. And during that year, I got a phone call from another radio colleague of his that I'd met like in passing once, named Bob Pittman. And he said, "Hey, I heard you might want to work for me in cable TV." And I said, "Well, no, Bob. I watch TV. I don't make it." I had done a couple commercials for him. I learned a little bit about television, but I mean like a couple commercials, you know, and Bob never takes no for an answer. And he said, "Well, you know, why don't we have coffee? You know, let's meet." I went and met him. He was 25. I was 27. And I walked out. I went, "Wow, my boss in radio is kind of a bozo." and this guy is really smart. And one of the things that Dale taught me was the job doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is your boss. Go with the boss. And the next morning I quit my job, and May 5th, 1980, I started in cable TV as the sole promotion person and production person on the movie channel Interstitials.
Wow.
And 30 days later, Bob put out the memo that said, "We're starting the music channel." And I went in and demanded a job on the music channel, which turned into MTV, and that was that.
Jim and John, did you ever work with Dale? Like, do you have any reminiscences of him?
It's funny what Fred said, though, about the job doesn't matter, but the boss. And John always said, and we used to say, Tom was the best boss you could have, right? I mean, he was a great boss. But I think I did meet Dale a couple times. I remember Tom's like, "This is Dale Pond," but I was, 20. I was like, "Oh,
Right.
okay. Yeah. Hey, how you doing?" I didn't really grasp the.
And I was oblivious.
But Tom was a great boss.
Trust me, if you had worked with him, you would never forget. And I don't mean that necessarily always in a positive way.
Oh, yeah. Well, we had those clients, that's for sure. Yeah.
But by the way, just so we're clear, he was brilliant. I wouldn't be doing one of the things I do without that mentorship.
I know. I read that article you sent. It was really powerful, actually.
Yeah.
I didn't know how big of a guy that was in everyone's life. It seems like he shaped a lot of people.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, Fred, you're starting to get a sense of what this podcast is all about. We really talk mostly about sound design, and we try to present it in a palatable way for beginners, somebody who might be just starting out in the world of sound design. But we also talk a lot about the business and about Tom Clack and mentorship and all that.
And stupid stuff.
Yeah. But that's, one reason why
sauce.
we're so happy to have you here is
Yeah.
that you can speak to both things, and we're going to talk to you about sound
Not the
design
stupid
as well.
stuff, though.
Yeah, not the stupid stuff.
The stupider the better,
maybe,
don't
yeah,
you think?
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about Fred Allen as well, since you've, as you said, started out at MTV right at the ground floor, and then MTV was sold to Warner Communications and Amex. And then you ran MTV's promo group for its first year and went off to start Fred Allen with Alan Goodman. So how is it that Fred Allen retained their independence and weren't just part of the MTV conglomerate?
Yeah, like the promo arm.
department.
Promo arm, yeah.
So I wanted to leave MTV because I had a horrible experience with a senior executive there, and I just was horrified by my experience. I wanted to get the hell out. And I went to Alan Goodman, who was my college radio buddy, who had started working with me at MTV. And I said, look, I'm leaving. And he's like, what? This looked like a good job.
Right. That sounded like Alan, by the way.
Yeah. and I said, well, I'm not leaving quite yet because I don't know what I'm going to do. But I'm just telling you, I'm out of here. And one thing led to another. And Al and I had always wanted to make TV shows. And along the way, we, along with another friend of ours who had been an MTV supplier, got an assignment to make a TV show for, of all things, the Playboy Channel.
Oh, cool.
It's like, okay, that's our ticket. We have a year contract to make this show, and we're going to make TV shows and blah, blah, blah. And we quit. And Bob Pittman, after offering to double my salary, and me in my arrogant youth said, Bob, I've been so stupid. I've been working at half salary all this time. I'm an idiot. I'll make twice as much money on my own. By the way, the first year we lived off our MasterCards. We barely made any money because the Playboy show didn't work out. No. But almost immediately after we left, Bob signed us up to be consultants back to MTV Networks. And we remained consultants there for the next 10 years.
Oh, consultancy. That's a great job.
Yeah. Well, it has its ups and downs. And by the way, he hired us at half our salaries to be consultants. But, it worked out really well. So the fact that we had sort of established the ground floor for how MTV operated, we're, in retrospect, we're known kind of for the logo, which I completely understand, which was designed not by us, but by my best friend from childhood, Frank Olinsky. It was really that we provided a structure for how MTV would be a company that presented itself to the public. We set up the vocabulary of how this channel would operate. Literally, sometimes the words, how we structured the story of MTV for the public, so that this weird thing that came on television where there were no TV shows could still be accepted by the greater public as a mass appeal event. And a little while into Fred Allen, Bob called up one day and said, the company has made me president of programming for the company, and I just fired the guy running Nickelodeon because Nickelodeon is number 30 out of 30 cable networks in America. 30 cable networks in America. It was the lowest rated, and I fired all of the people that we could afford to fire, but we have to fix it. And I went, gee, that's too bad. Well, best of luck. He said, well, go in there and figure out how to fix it. And I'm like, humana. You're like, what? We didn't really like Nickelodeon. We didn't like the people who worked there. They all seemed like stuffed shirts to us. We were 30 years old. We barely liked kids. we were kids ourselves.
Right.
But then we looked at the bank account. We weren't making any money. We didn't have any clients. And we saluted, said, yes, sir, and we showed up. And Nickelodeon didn't understand why we were there. We were the evil MTV that was,
I was just gonna
anti-kid.
say, yeah, right. Immediately a suspect.
It's so funny to think of MTV and Nickelodeon as rivals at some point.
Yeah, and we had all been, as employees together, we had lived literally on the same floor of a building, but we avoided each other. I think that's the easiest way to say. They did their thing, we did our thing.
We would have lunch together at Clack Studios, everybody in the place, all at one time. And the MTV people never knew the Nickelodeon people, and the Nickelodeon people never knew the MTV
It's so
people.
funny.
Exactly.
But that was later even. Fred's talking about
Yeah, well, they did different things, and they were consumed with the work they were doing.
Right.
They didn't know anybody anywhere. I talk about it all the time, but I wasn't in the mainstream of the television business or even the cable television business. I stayed in my office and did did my work. Yeah. So Jerry Laybourne was a very astute executive, and she figured, okay, if the boss wants us to meet these clowns, we'll do it. Mm-hmm. And very quickly, I think, on either side of the table, we realized stuff, which is that the Nickelodeon people at the time didn't really know a lot about television. Mm. They kind of believed in kids, and they knew a lot about kids. And we didn't really know anything about kids.
But you knew about television, yeah.
Well,
a little bit.
We barely knew about television. But we knew about what we had accomplished at MTV, let's put it that way. And over that several month period that we got to know each other, we started learning about kids. And we started learning about the love of kids. And we started remembering what we liked when we were kids and watching television. Remember, Alan and I were of the generation of the first television generation. Mm. And TV was the Wild West. Mm-hmm. And the wildest part of the Wild West was kids' television programming. Yeah. Because the executives didn't like kids' television programming. They were only doing it because the FCC told them they had to.
Right.
And so they would hire these nutballs, who just said, sure, we can do things for kids.
Yeah, we met some of those.
Right. It was a crazy time. And we remembered that. And in our heads, we sort of went back there. We took an office and we literally moved in. And I remember one day saying to Jerry, look, I'm not sure we know anything about increasing television ratings. Mm. But by the time we're done, here's what we can guarantee. The few men that work here, because at the time Nickelodeon was really very female dominated, which is very unusual for the media business.
Interesting.
It was all young women who felt like they wanted to do good things for children. They were trying to get the kids to eat vegetables. And I said, the few men that are going to be here are going to be shooting spitballs. Mm-hmm. And the women that they're shooting the spitballs at, they're going to be on top of their desk dancing with a tequila in one hand and the hem of their skirt in their other hand, like pulled over their heads. Everybody's going to have a really good time. And if they're having a good time, the work will be better. And they took a big gulp and took a big breath in and went, sure, okay. I guess we can try it. And lo and behold, we got there in June of 1984 when they were number 30. In January of 1985, Nickelodeon was the number one cable network. Oh. And we had our future banked out for us for the next 10 years.
And that's kind of when I started doing Nickelodeon, actually, 1984. Yep.
Coincidence?
And I did nothing but Nickelodeon for like 5 years. I think.
Yeah,
that was my only client with Wendell Craig and Wendy Craig.
Yeah, right. So it's very funny to me because right now I'm sitting in a room with the person who did so much of the sound effects for the Nickelodeon on-air promos. That's Jim Stauffer right here. The person who did the lion's share of the sound effects for the MTV promos. That's Mr. John Terrell right here. And myself, who at the time was a little child, and I was the target audience for Nickelodeon. I remember watching Pinwheel and Today's Special.
Pinwheel, right. Yeah.
And You Can't Do That on Television. So I started watching right when you had revived Nickelodeon. I think it was probably 1986 when I started watching.
Right.
Yeah. So there we have
The
it.
gold, what
So-
do they call
so
them?
let's-
Golden years, right? Is that what they call them?
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's talk to the clack of it, because
Right.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say,
the,
it wasn't
the
just me.
relationship with Tom Clack and Clack Recording was critical to both MTV and to Nickelodeon.
Right.
So let's rewind to 1981.
Hey, nice.
As I said, I had been trained by Dale Pond.
Right.
I did a couple commercials for him. And one day, so we went and shot the first commercial we did for our country music radio station with Freddie Fender, who at the time had a couple of country music hits.
Great.
And I'd never been in a room with a camera, with a movie camera and lights and all that type of stuff. And I had nothing to do with it other than, helping somebody load their equipment. We shot the film with Freddie Fender, with Dale interviewing him. And what the spots were going to be is sections of the interview cut to 30 seconds and put on television with the WHN logo on them. That was the spot. So we got back to New York, and Dale handed me the Nagra audio from the shoot.
Yep.
And said, edit the spots. And I'm like, excuse me? He said, here's the tape. Do what you do with our promos. I was the production guy for all the promos on the radio station, where I would take an Eagles song and cut it down to 30 seconds.
Yeah, right.
And, had the DJs do a voiceover. And I went, oh, is that what you do? He goes, well, no one else does it that way. I want you to do it that way. I want you to edit the audio before we do any video.
Brilliant.
And I said, okay, why do we do that? And he said, well, you're free, or, we pay you a salary and you're going to do it for no extra money.
Right.
So that's free.
Right. And video
And
editing.
the video,
Yeah.
right. And the video editing is $350 an hour.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if you create the soundtrack and it's perfect exactly the way we want it, then it's kind of easy to just sort of lay in the video. I went, oh, okay, got it. He said, beside, nobody really realizes this, but sound is critical to video.
Absolutely.
And if you get the sound right, how bad can the video be? And like, okay, I was an audio guy. I was a music guy. I was, I had learned college. Alan and I had done, radio promotion in college. I got all that. So I went and edited a bunch of 30-second spots. Now, in those days, video had just started doing computer-based editing. And the only place in America who did it was in Burbank, in LA, in Hollywood. So we had to fly out to Hollywood with our 2-inch videotapes at the time. And we tell the editor, okay, we have these audio tracks, and now you need to sync the video to the audio tracks. And the guy's like, what? It won't sync.
Right.
There were none of the technical solutions to syncing audio to video that exist today. I mean, they existed a few years later.
Well, even then, it didn't really work that well. We were just talking about.
Yeah,
that
we were
before,
just
right?
talking about that. Yeah.
But our clips from the audio were 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I mean, it wasn't
Right.
It wasn't like a full soundtrack.
Yeah,
It's not going to drift too much, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we would sit there and, move it a frame this way or frame. I didn't even know what a frame was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we walked out with spots.
Yeah.
So
And it worked.
the next time we had to do spots, Dale sent me to, this place was called Compact Video. He sent me to Compact on my own. And the editor was like, this is a joke. This is not how film and video are done. And so I left the room and I called Dale, and Dale's like, fuck you, fuck him. We're paying. Who does he think he is?
Right. You're the client, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I kind of sheepishly go back in and I tell Tony, the editor, what Dale had said, and he takes a deep breath and goes, okay, I've worked with nutcases before, go for it, And I think I ended up doing 75 spots in that method, for WHN.
Cool.
I mean, 75 versions of the spots.
Right, of that spot.
Country music stars,
And we were just watching some of those, actually.
Yeah, before we got on the phone with you, Fred, we were watching and admiring some of the WHN spots.
Yeah.
And actually, we should link to if you happen to be listening on YouTube, dear listener, we should maybe link with a comment.
Yeah, they're gorgeous.
Yeah, they're amazing.
They are.
And they work like crazy, by the way, I should say. The ratings, at WHN just stayed there. We were the number 2 most listened to station of all stations in America during those years.
Right on.
I thought it was a country station.
What was your the Billboard review? Next best thing to rock and roll or something?
And now, a word from Parp Donk.
Who doesn't love fried foods?
And who doesn't like butter?
Hey, watch it!
Oops!
Oh, you dropped your butter stick in my fryer.
Oh no, my butter stick!
Wow, that tastes great.
Delish.
Introducing deep fried butter sticks. Creamy, golden, free-range Irish butter sticks. Lightly beer battered and rolled in kosher salt. Then crisped to a perfect golden brown. These butter sticks will have your guests grabbing their chests with joy. And look for new heart skippers for the highway or whenever you're on the go. Brought to you by Parp Snacks, a division of Parp Foods.
Now, MTV rolls around, and I had gone through this with Alan as to how we did this stuff at WHN, and I said, our budgets are really low. How are we going to figure out a way to do this for MTV? Now, the producers, writer-producers that were on my team at the beginning of MTV were Marcy Brathman, Richard Shankman, Mark Chusid, and a copywriter named Jay Dorfman. And I told them we were going to do this. And I said, okay, Alan, we're going to do this. What do you think we ought to do? And he said, well, we should go to Tom Clack. So I didn't know who Tom Clack was. Alan had been working in the record business at CBS Records, which is now Sony Music.
Right.
And Tom did all of the radio spots for CBS Records.
Right. We used to do all the CBS Epic, all those records, right?
So Alan said, Tom's a genius. He doesn't edit. He doesn't believe in editing.
No.
He does everything on the fly. And I'm like, oh my God. Because my one skill that I've ever had in the media business is I was an ace editor with a razor blade and magnetic tape.
Yep.
And he said, "Oh, he does all that stuff. He does it. He flies in the.
He flies it in. That's what he used to say.
And oh my God, really?" So I go to meet Tom with him, and I told him what we were going to do, and I said, "Look, I want to set up an assembly line because my team, while they know some stuff, they're really untrained and they're definitely not producers. And they've definitely never done promos. So here's the way I'm going to run the shop." My influence on that thing was Motown, which had been reviled for having an assembly line system. They wrote the songs one day, they went to the studio the next day, then the vocals were the next day, and people thought all the stuff sounded alike, but it was genius stuff. And I said, we have a very limited budget. So what I'm going to do, Tom, is we're going to write on Monday and Tuesday. Then the team will come in here and you guys will do the tracks on Wednesday. And I'm going to book video on Thursday and Friday. And we're going to have a set number of spots we do a week. I don't remember, what the number was. And we're going to do this every week. And because of that, I will pre-book you for a year.
Yep.
I'll just give you a contract, for a year. And then we went and did the same thing at the video company. It was Unitel over on 57th Street.
Yeah.
And we booked with, just like we did with Tom, we booked with one editor.
Gleason?
It was John.
Tierney. Yeah.
John Tierney.
Tierney.
And John...
He's a sweetheart.
When I walked in with my audio tracks for the movie channel and told him what we were going to do, John was like, okay, we can do that.
Yeah.
Completely unlike all the other editors that I worked with.
He was like that, yeah.
And so now I knew, with Tom in particular, that I had a person who could not only do the work, but teach Richard, Marcy, and Mark how to produce. It was my secret weapon was he would be their teacher. And it worked like a charm.
Yeah, and it's funny because he taught me and John how to fly in like that. And we were doing it then
Tom
too.
Clark. Yeah. Tom Clark, yeah.
And because I would edit before it, and we just take the record and just fly it in on two
like
tracks.
A DJ.
And
it was DJ stuff. You're matching beats with off a disc. And you're bringing up the fader at that moment that you do it, and there's
no surprise Doug DeFranco became Double D.
Yeah. And you got really good at it. I was great at it. Well, Fred, one time I did a CBS record commercial, the first one for LL Cool J, and he was 16, I think. And he was late. He was like an hour late for the session. Because we're like, where were you? It's like, they wouldn't let me at school yet. He was in high school.
Oh, wow.
So anyhow, I had the record, and it was his first record, and I was flying it in, and I missed that. And he's like, "What are you doing?" This is how you do it. And he reached over. I was, on one side of the turntable. He was on the opposite side. And he goes, "Let me do it." He did it the first time. I was like, okay.
Now I see why you are as famous
that was the only time I was ever really shown up, I think. Well, Double D maybe. But,
before I started working at Clack, I was working at a place called Penny Lane, which isn't there anymore. It's not the Penny Lane that's around now. But it was a music studio. And I was hired by MTV to make a spot. They must have been busy at Clack or whatever. And a woman showed up, a producer. And I start editing the music,
with a razor blade.
With a razor blade, and she's like, no, just do that thing.
Yeah,
I'm like, what thing?
Yeah.
And she says, the thing where you just you take
use
the record, you just take
yeah.
the record
Fly
and just you do the like they do, and I'm like, what do they do? and we were at a standstill. I just couldn't figure out what she wanted me to do.
She expected everyone to know that.
She just left. She was very dissatisfied.
Oops.
And then when I went to Clack Studios. And Tom starts teaching me like that.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh my God, now I know it. I went right back to that. I was like, oh my God, now I know exactly what she was talking about,
right.
So 20 years later, I'm back at MTV running their online business for a disastrous year, the worst work year of my life. And I figured, okay, I'm back at MTV. I ought to go visit the MTV promo team, who, I knew none of them. It switched over 20 years, many, many times.
Oh, yeah.
And I go in and I introduce myself to somebody or other, and they look at me and go, you're the one. And I'm like, excuse me? They said, audio first, huh? You're the one. And all of these people who had been trained in film.
Yep.
And now they were forced into this system.
Right.
That nobody could understand why it was the system.
Right.
Remember, in today's terms, MTV was a startup. They gave us a very, very, very tight budget leash.
Right.
And it was because of that I could make the excuse as to why I wanted to do things so-called backwards way, which I knew would be better for MTV than anything else. Leave out the fact that Tom and John would become everyone's teachers.
Yeah.
It was because I knew it was a much more efficient way to produce from a production standpoint, and creatively, it would provide the pop, the sizzle that generally commercials didn't have.
Yeah, that's what I always tell people, that the reason MTV got so popular is that all the commercials were done with the audio first, so the music was perfect.
Right.
It was a music channel, and the music was perfect. There were no bad edits.
It wasn't just the music. Where the voiceover went wasn't there to match a picture that happened to go a certain way.
Right.
The voiceover was there because when you put it on that frame versus that frame, it would pop. And ultimately, my ability as a manager to have a volume of work that came out that was twice what anyone else was doing for the same budgets was because of this audio first. So it creatively was right, but managerially it was even better.
So great.
Yeah.
And fast forward now to 1984 and Nickelodeon, the people I hired, they were basically writers. They for completely different disciplines. And now Tom Clack could teach them to be a producer, and John Tierney could teach them to be a producer. And so the finishing school of Clack and Tierney were the superpowers, the magical secret superpowers of that company across these two powerhouse networks.
That's so interesting.
It's true, though. John and I, we've trained so many generations to be producers, and even people have come up to me like, you've taught me how to do audio. Because the classic Viacom way is when you get a certain age as a producer, you're out. And then they just hire someone right out of college again, but they don't really know, so you have to...
Yeah, so we'll send you in with John. We'll send you in with John Terrell.
Or me,
we'll teach you how to do. He'll teach you how to do a voiceover.
Yeah, or me, or whatever. So it's but it's funny you said about I would tell producers that were always video first. I was like, you know what? If you do audio first and you also understand video first, it just makes you a better producer. If you just do one way, but if you can do both ways and then even interchange them if you have to, it just makes you stronger. And some people got it and some people didn't, but that's just the way it is.
And here was the great thing for me, because I'm an incredibly undisciplined person. Pretty much after I got the MTV team inculcated into the system, which was basically, I think maybe I had one meeting at Clack with them and one meeting with Tierney. I never went to the studio again, ever.
I didn't know you until long into Fred Allen.
Well, like I said,
and even then,
but my first MTV session was with you, Fred. I remember I told you this, right? It was 99 Luft balloons. we cut that spot for 99 Luft balloons. I remember that.
My first Clack spot wasn't a spot at all. It was the Epic Records sales tape.
The Epic.
Yeah, the Epic. That's what it was called. That was my first thing. And the funny thing about it is I had just been an artist on Epic Records.
Oh, you're kidding.
So I was coming off of this, and I've got all these record executives who are sitting in my room who don't know me as the engineer John Terrell. They all know me as like the rock star John Terrell.
And now you knocked down a notch. Sorry, John.
What are you doing here?
Can you get us some more coffee, John?
By the way, my last time actually with a razor blade in my hand doing any editing was on the Epic. Because we had an incredibly short budget and an incredibly short timeline. So I went to David and I begged. And I said, can you just turn over the keys to the studio to Alan and me on the weekend?
That's what we did.
And we will go in and finish the project ourselves.
We worked around the clock.
And we did the entire, I think it was a half-hour film on audio before we edited one frame of the video. It was really, and for me, I did particularly crazy shit. I had read an article, I don't know, in Newsweek, that there had been a bunch of research that showed that if you took the breaths out of audio tracks and it sped up the audio like by whatever 20%.
Yeah.
That it was just as decipherable
Yeah.
and more memorable for the listener. So I went in and took these hours of interviews that we had done, and I cut every gap in every interview, like to the, in between words in a sentence.
Oh,
I was
boy.
pulling stuff out.
That's my life every day, basically.
Yeah, we do that all the time, right?
That's exactly what I do.
Yeah. It's funny.
It was crazy.
And you don't think it's going to still be, discernible or coherent.
It
but
works
it is.
perfectly,
Yeah.
though. It works totally perfectly.
It sounds
Yeah.
almost
Yep.
sort of hyper realistic, and so it makes people pay attention a little more, I think.
I remember one time I went in Tom's room. He took all the breaths and put them all together.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember that.
He's
I
like, Jim,
remember that.
Jim, come
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
And he put it on the sex reel because it was, and it was the funniest thing, because he's like, I'm gonna take all the breaths that I took out and put them all together, and it was like a million edits. I could see it going by on the head, and it was like.
So, John, that's on the sex reel that I just gave you today.
Yeah.
So Clack
I
had
remember it.
Remember
Yeah.
all the sound effect reels Clack had, Fred? And one was one was the sex reel. We had
Do I ever?
How could anyone
The
forget?
Zen reel.
We're going to have to leave it there and resume next episode. Thank you so much, Fred Seibert, who you will hear more from next time on Parp Donk. And yeah, that was episode 11. I'm Amanda.
I'm Jim.
I'm John.
And
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned for the next installment with Fred.
Want to show the world you're a Parper? Now you can. Check out our merch page at parpdonk.com/shop.